The Johnson family's home sat in the heart of a pristine suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where lawns were trimmed and the air carried the faint hum of sprinklers. Inside, however, perfection was only a veneer. Martha Johnson, a meticulous homemaker, spent her days curating an image of control. Her husband Greg worked long hours. His presence felt more in his absence than his words. Together, they had built a life that neighbors admired, but one their only child, Chloe, silently resented. Chloe appeared to be the ideal daughter, a straight-A student, reserved and polite. Yet, beneath her composed exterior, lay a turbulent sea of loneliness. She had grown accustomed to the silence at dinner, the absence of warmth in her father's voice, and her mother's constant critiques disguised as advice. The evening began like any other, the sun sinking behind the rows of identical houses. Hours later, flashing blue lights bathed the street in chaos. Officers rushed into the Johnson home after a neighbor reported screams and glass shattering. Inside, the scene was chilling. Martha lay unconscious on the kitchen floor, her pulse weak but steady. Greg, found upstairs, clutched his side, blood soaking his shirt. The house, once so immaculate, was now a canvas of destruction. Broken furniture, scattered belongings, and a pervasive sense of dread painted a picture no one could understand. He and Greg sat together on the couch, painted a picture no detectives pieced together what they could. Signs of a struggle led them to question everyone present. All fingers pointed to one person: Chloe. On September 12, 2018, detectives pieced together what little they possessed. An unnamed stranger showed up in Red Valley, California. At first, the notion seemed absurd. Chloe? The quiet, obedient teenager? Her calm demeanor unnerved the officers as she sat in the living room, her hands folded neatly on her lap. "Do you understand why you're here, Chloe?" one of them asked. Her reply was chilling in its simplicity. "Yes." The neighbors, whispering from behind curtains, couldn't fathom it. Parents speculated she's always been so polite, but the evidence was undeniable. And the officers had no choice but to bring her in for questioning. For Chloe, the walls of her perfect world had been crumbling for years. Greg, always engrossed in his work, had little time for her milestones or missteps. Martha, obsessed with appearances, scrutinized Chloe's every move, creating an ever-present pressure to conform. Then came the discovery. Chloe had overheard a hushed phone call, a voice that wasn't her father's, and a tone she'd never heard from her mother. The pieces fell into place too easily. A hidden affair, secrets buried under the guise of family values. Chloe's anger simmered, feeding the loneliness that had grown into a shadow she couldn't escape. Her isolation became her constant companion, but she found an outlet: Ashley. Rebellious, outspoken, and free of judgment, Ashley offered something Chloe never experienced at home: validation. Ashley encouraged her to express the resentment she had bottled for years, subtly planting ideas Chloe wasn't sure were hers to begin with. What drove Chloe to act? Was it years of neglect, the sting of betrayal, or the manipulative whispers of a friend? And why had no one seen it coming? The questions hung in the air, unanswered, as officers carried Chloe out of the house in handcuffs. In the quiet aftermath, neighbors whispered, parents held their children tighter, and the Johnson house stood as a silent witness to a story that had only just begun. The case would shake the community to its core. What happened inside that home? Why would a girl who seemed to have everything commit such a heinous act? These were the questions everyone demanded answers to, but no one was ready for what they would uncover. The truth, as it unraveled, would leave them speechless. Chloe Johnson stood out in every way that mattered to her parents. With her polished manners, impeccable grades, and a spotless school record, she embodied everything Martha and Greg wanted in a daughter. Teachers praised her as diligent and mature beyond her years, while classmates envied her effortless poise. But beneath her composed exterior, Chloe felt invisible in her own home. Every accolade seemed to pass unnoticed, every achievement acknowledged with hollow smiles. When she looked at her parents, she saw two people so consumed by their own lives that they barely saw her. Her success was not her own, it was their expectation, another notch in the Johnson family's public image. Martha prided herself on her reputation as the neighborhood's consummate hostess. She was the woman who could juggle a charity event, keep a spotless home, and still bake cookies for the school fundraiser. But her perfection came at a price. Her relentless drive made her critical and controlling. She monitored every detail of Chloe's life, from her wardrobe to her social media posts, ensuring nothing could tarnish the family's image. Greg, on the other hand, was absent even when he was present. His job demanded long hours, and when he was home, he retreated behind newspapers and terse responses. Conversations with him felt like crossing a minefield. Chloe learned early to tread lightly. While Martha suffocated her with expectations, Greg's silence made her feel like a ghost. The suffering made her feel like a ghost. Sometimes Chloe wondered if Greg, the same age when he trapped between her mother's scrutiny and her father's indifference, Chloe began to withdraw. The pressure to excel, to maintain the flawless image her parents demanded, grew unbearable. In moments of solitude, she wrestled with the anger building inside her, an emotion she barely understood. "Why do you care so much about what people think?" she once asked her mother, her voice laced with uncharacteristic defiance. Martha's reply was sharp, as if Chloe had crossed an invisible line. "Because what people think matters, Chloe. That's how the world works." Her father, as usual, said nothing. Chloe's nights became filled with restless thoughts. Her parents' constant pursuit of perfection had left no room for her own needs. Every missed conversation, every glance that slid past her, chipped away at the love she thought she had for them. Ashley entered Chloe's life like a spark in dry grass. Bold, unpredictable, and unapologetically rebellious, she was everything Chloe wasn't allowed to be. While Chloe rehearsed her answers to avoid Martha's criticism, Ashley spoke her mind with reckless abandon. "You know what your problem is?" Ashley said one afternoon as they sat by the bleachers, watching the other students practice for a school play. "You let them control you. They're just using you to look good." "Since when did I ever do that?" she asked. "Are you?" Chloe stiffened. "That's not true. They just care about how I do." Ashley scoffed. "Caring isn't treating you like a trophy. You deserve more than that, Chloe." The words lingered, sinking deeper than Chloe wanted to admit. Ashley's friendship became her refuge, a place where she could vent her frustrations without fear of judgment. But Ashley's encouragement to stand up for herself slowly turned into something darker. One evening, while searching for a notebook in her mother's desk, Chloe found something she wasn't meant to see. A letter. It was tucked between receipts and grocery lists, but the words leapt out at her. "I missed you. I can't stop thinking about what we had." Her hands trembled as she read it again. It wasn't her father's handwriting. The pieces came together quickly. Late-night calls, unexplained absences, the lingering guilt in Martha's eyes during dinner. Chloe's chest tightened as betrayal crashed over her like a wave. She confronted her mother the next day, her voice shaking with anger. "Who is he?" Martha's face went pale. "You don't understand." "I understand enough," Chloe snapped. "You lied. You lied to all of us." Her father's footsteps echoed down the hall. Martha's panicked whisper came quick and sharp. "Don't say a word." From that moment, Chloe's trust in her parents crumbled. Every interaction felt tainted, every word from her mother a mask hiding deceit. She turned to Ashley, whose advice grew more insistent. "They don't deserve your loyalty," Ashley said, her voice low and coaxing. "Why should you protect them when they've done nothing for you?" Chloe hesitated, torn between her anger and a lingering hope that things could be fixed. But Ashley's influence was strong, her words dripping with the promise of freedom. Her resentment grew, fed by her mother's silence and her father's oblivion. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. As tension mounted, Chloe's emotions became a powder keg, waiting for the spark that would set everything ablaze. Chloe's days blurred into a monotonous cycle of expectations and disappointments. Each interaction with her parents added another layer of frustration. Martha's constant corrections felt like needles pricking her skin. "Did you really think that dress was appropriate for dinner?" Martha's voice carried a sharp edge. "It's just a dress," Chloe muttered, her tone laced with irritation. "It's never just anything with you, Chloe," Martha shot back. Greg remained indifferent, flipping through a work report at the table. His silence cut deeper than her mother's criticisms. Chloe's anger festered in the quiet spaces where love should have been, and it began to twist her view of everything they did. Ashley's words were like drops of poison, subtle but potent. "They don't see you, do they?" she asked one evening as they sat behind the gym, sharing a cigarette Chloe hadn't even wanted. "They think they do," Chloe replied hesitantly. Ashley smirked, shaking her head. "No, they see what they've made. The perfect daughter. But you're more than that. You deserve more than their rules." Her voice was intoxicating, a strange mix of freedom and defiance. Ashley's disdain for authority was a stark contrast to Chloe's carefully managed life. She encouraged Chloe to speak up, challenge her parents, and question their intentions. "You're stronger than they think," Ashley said, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "You just need to show them." Chloe's world tilted when she found the text messages. Her mother's phone, left unattended on the kitchen counter, buzzed with a notification. The preview was enough to make her heart stop. "I'm sorry. Last night was unforgettable. I can't stop thinking about you." Chloe's breath caught as she scrolled through the conversation. The words confirmed her worst fears. She confronted Martha later that evening, her voice trembling with fury. "How long?" she demanded, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the counter. Martha's face drained of color. "Chloe, it's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think," Chloe's voice cracked. "You've been lying to us, to Dad, to me." Greg entered the room, sensing the tension. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone more confused than concerned. "Nara, look." Chloe turned to him, her eyes burning with tears. "Ask her. Ask her about the man she's been seeing behind your back." The room erupted in chaos. Accusations flew, and the fragile threads holding the family together began to unravel. Exits stood out, one by one, in a hasty skirmish. Ashley was there to pick up the pieces, her presence both comforting and unsettling. "See? I told you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "They're not worth your loyalty, Chloe. They only care about themselves." Chloe didn't respond immediately. Her anger simmered beneath the surface, and Ashley seemed to feed off it, coaxing it to grow. "You don't have to put up with this," Ashley continued. "You have me. You don't need them." The bond between them deepened, though it wasn't entirely healthy. Ashley thrived on Chloe's dependence, guiding her down paths she wouldn't have considered on her own. It was Ashley who suggested skipping school, Ashley, who encouraged her to speak her mind, no matter the consequences. "They don't deserve your respect," Ashley whispered one night. "Let them see who you really are." Chloe's emotions spiraled out of control. Her once calculated demeanor gave way to impulsive decisions and volatile reactions. She slammed doors, raised her voice, and defied her mother's instructions without hesitation. She'd never seen the man she loved, or adopted child, without hesitation or anxiety. "What's gotten into you?" Martha demanded one evening, her frustration boiling over. "What's gotten into me?" Chloe shot back, her voice trembling with rage. "Maybe I'm tired of being your puppet. Maybe I'm done pretending this family is something it's not." Laughter flooded Chloe's chest, and she roared in agony as the luminous figure disappeared. Greg tried to intervene, his tone flat and ineffective. "Chloe, enough." "No, Dad," she snapped. "Not enough. I'm done being the good daughter. I'm done playing along with your lies." Martha's face hardened, but Chloe didn't care. The anger that had consumed her felt liberating, even as it pushed her closer to the edge. The rain was pouring down in torrents, and clouds clung to the trees, and tensions within the Johnson household reached a fever pitch. Chloe's actions became erratic, her words sharper, her defiance unrelenting. Ashley's influence was undeniable, her voice a constant in Chloe's ear, urging her to take control of her life. But control came with a cost. Every decision Chloe made widened the chasm between her and her parents, setting the stage for the storm that was about to break. Control held back until the very last. She washed her hands and held them dry against the skirt. Chloe sat in her dimly lit bedroom, staring at the framed family photo on her desk. The smiling faces of her parents felt like a taunt. Anger churned within her, a volatile mix of betrayal and frustration. The discovery of her mother's affair and her father's cold indifference had pushed her into a corner. "They've taken everything from you." Ashley's words echoed in her mind. "Don't let them control you anymore." Her hands trembled as she clenched the photo, the glass cracking under the pressure. Chloe's thoughts spiraled as she considered the one thing that might finally free her. Her mind screamed against it, but Ashley's voice whispered louder. "You have to show them you're not their puppet." The decision was made, and with it, a chilling sense of resolve. Ashley's plan sounded simple, even liberating at first. Chloe clung to her words like a lifeline. "You'll be fine," Ashley reassured her, leaning back against the park bench they'd met at earlier that day. "All you have to do is scare them. Make them feel what you've felt all these years." "How?" Chloe asked hesitantly. Ashley smirked, her tone dripping with confidence. "Leave that to me. Just follow my lead. Santito patrols the area, and all the other Salvation Army is protecting you." Chloe nodded, too blinded by anger and desperation to question Ashley's growing control. Yet, as the plan unfolded, it began to spin wildly beyond what she imagined. Ashley's instructions became darker, her ideas more dangerous. As he rose, she found herself watching him. "This isn't what I wanted," Chloe whispered one night. Ashley's expression hardened. "You can't back out now. You've come too far." Trapped by her own choices and Ashley's manipulation, Chloe realized she was careening toward something far worse than she'd ever intended. The confrontation unfolded like a storm, chaotic and uncontrollable. Chloe confronted her parents in the living room, her voice trembling with rage. "Do you even hear yourselves?" she screamed. "You've lied to me, ignored me, and then you act like I'm the one ruining this family." Marta's face flushed red. "Chloe, calm down. This is not how you—" "Don't tell me to calm down." Chloe's voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. "You're a liar, and you both have destroyed everything." Greg's attempt to step in only fueled the chaos. "Enough, Chloe. You're out of control." The argument escalated until it turned physical. In the heat of the moment, something snapped. A vase shattered, and Martha collapsed to the floor, clutching her head. Greg, stunned, stumbled back, his hand pressing against a deep wound. Chloe froze, the enormity of what had just happened crashing over her. The aftermath was silent, save for Chloe's ragged breathing. She stood frozen, her eyes darting between her parents and the destruction around her. "What have I done?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The weight of guilt was suffocating. Her hands trembled as she knelt beside her mother, panic setting in. "Mom? Mom! Wake up!" Ashley's words replayed in her head, but they no longer felt empowering. Instead, they echoed with a sinister edge. "You're stronger than this, Chloe," Ashley had said. But now, Chloe felt anything but strong. Her heart raced as she fumbled for her phone, her mind spiraling. She wanted to undo everything, to rewind to the moment before it all went so wrong. The next few hours were a blur of flashing lights and shouting voices. Paramedics rushed in, police officers questioned her, and neighbors gathered outside, their faces filled with curiosity and shock. Chloe sat on the porch steps, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She couldn't bring herself to look at her parents being wheeled into the ambulance. The weight of what she'd done pressed on her chest, each breath a struggle. Her family, already fractured, was now shattered beyond repair. Martha's betrayal, Greg's neglect, and Chloe's own choices had left nothing but devastation in their wake. As officers escorted her to the police car, she caught a glimpse of the house. It was no longer her home, just a shell of what it once was. In the days that followed, the cracks in Ashley's mask began to show. Her reassuring words turned defensive, her loyalty wavering. "You know what you were doing," Ashley snapped during their last conversation. "Don't act like I made you do anything." Chloe stared at her, realization dawning. Ashley's motives had never been about helping her. They had been about control, about feeding her own need for chaos. As Chloe sat in her cell that night, the truth settled like a stone in her chest. She had been a pawn in Ashley's game, her own vulnerabilities exploited to devastating effect. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into Chloe's wrists as she sat silently in the back of the police car. Her chest felt hollow, her breaths shallow and uneven. The flashes of red and blue lights outside blurred together, reflecting the chaos inside her mind. Standing there, she heard the police cars blaring by and heard her little girl cry hello in the dark. While she waited for the bright lights of the cars, she sat silently in the back of the police car. "Chloe, do you understand why you're being taken in?" an officer asked, his voice steady but firm. Chloe shook her head. She had no answers for the invaders. Her eyes remained fixed on her lap, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Reality set in with a crushing weight as the enormity of her actions sank deeper. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, leaving her family and herself in ruins. Martha sat at the edge of her hospital bed, her head in her hands. Bandages wrapped around her forehead, but the pain that consumed her wasn't physical. She replayed Chloe's furious words over and over, each one cutting deeper than the last. "How could it come to this?" she muttered, her voice cracking. Greg stood by the window, his face pale, his shoulders slumped. "We failed her," he said, the guilt etched into his features. "I should have been there. I should have seen the signs." But their blame didn't stop at themselves. Each word they exchanged became an accusation. Resentment grew between them, turning shared grief into a chasm too wide to bridge. When questioned, Ashley's demeanor was icy and detached. "I had nothing to do with it," she insisted, her tone sharp and defensive. Chloe was already angry. She made her own decisions. Her denial left Chloe reeling. The person she trusted most had vanished, leaving her to face the fallout alone. The realization stung more than she expected. Another betrayal added to a growing pile. The case became the talk of the town. News outlets plastered the family's photo everywhere, dissecting every detail. "A picture-perfect life shattered," one headline read. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, speculating on what had really happened. Chloe's peers avoided her name like a curse, while her parents became pariahs in a community that once admired them. But the first girl in her community was the one who remained quiet. The courtroom was no kinder. Every hidden flaw, every suppressed argument was laid bare under glaring lights. The once pristine Johnson name was now synonymous with scandal and tragedy. Months later, the house stood empty, a ghost of its former self. Martha packed her belongings quietly, each item a painful reminder of what had been lost. She fled from her house, determined to escape the bitter reach of the bitter past. The house passed out of the picture. Greg watched her from the doorway. "So, this is it," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. She didn't look up. "There's nothing left, Greg. We're broken, and I don't know how to fix us." He nodded, his heart sinking as she walked past him. The silence in the house was deafening. As the door closed behind her, Greg sat down, his head in his hands. The family they had built, the life they had worked for, had dissolved under the weight of their grief and mistakes, leaving nothing but memories and regrets. This script captures the devastating aftermath of Chloe's actions, weaving in Chloe sat alone in her cell, her thoughts tangled in knots she couldn't unravel. She had been overlooked for years. Her parents' attention, if it ever existed, had always been directed elsewhere, toward their perfect image, their endless pursuit of a flawless family. Love, if it was there at all, felt conditional. Her father's coldness, her mother's obsession with perfection, left Chloe adrift, an emotional orphan. She had longed for affection, for validation, but she had only been given expectations. And as the years passed, that void inside her grew deeper, feeding on every silence, every unspoken disappointment. It wasn't just neglect, it was manipulation. An unspoken rule that she had to be something or someone she wasn't in order to gain their fleeting approval. It had all made her vulnerable, ready to be preyed upon by anyone who would give her the attention she craved. And the fear, too. There were things that were never said in the Johnson household. It was a home filled with silence. Uncomfortable, suffocating silence. The kind of silence that filled every room, every meal, every moment. Martha's affair was the unspoken betrayal that had eaten away at the foundation of the family. But it wasn't just that. It was all the moments Chloe had tried to reach out, to make them see her, only to be met with indifference. The secrets, the unacknowledged pain, festered in the corners, growing until the tension became unbearable. Snatching her hand away, both Ashley and Martha turned to the window. Greg's indifference only worsened it. When Chloe needed him most, he was absent, physically present, but emotionally detached. He didn't hear her silent cries for help, nor did he notice the slow, gradual unraveling of their family. In the end, the silence killed them all, one broken conversation at a time. Chloe's heart raced as she thought about the questions that haunted her now. Could it all have been avoided? If only someone had noticed, listened. If only her parents had seen her struggle, seen the cracks in her facade, would it have all turned out differently? Could they have saved her from the dark path she eventually walked down? It was a question that burned in her mind, one that she could never answer. But the weight of that unanswered question gnawed at her. Was this the consequence of neglect, or was it inevitable, given the secrets they had all kept? Ashley had seen Chloe's loneliness and used it. She had spotted her vulnerability and twisted it like a knife in an open wound. In a way, Chloe had been desperate for Ashley's approval, desperate for someone to acknowledge her, to make her feel alive, in a way her parents never had. Ashley offered her an escape, a way out of the cage her family had built around her. But it wasn't freedom, it was manipulation. A game that Ashley had already decided. Chloe had become a pawn in Ashley's plan, her every move carefully orchestrated to fuel Ashley's own sense of control. But in the end, it was Chloe who had paid the price. Her need for connection had made her an easy target, and in her desperation, she had allowed herself to be led down a path of irreversible consequences. Safeguarding the truth, the literary publisher made it clear that it was unacceptable for Chloe to share the truth. In the end, it wasn't the crime itself that destroyed them. It was the silence, the neglect, and the secrets they kept hidden. Every lie, every hidden truth, every moment of emotional abandonment had chipped away at the very foundation of their family. Chloe's crime was not born of malice, but of years of emotional starvation. It was the culmination of years of being ignored, of being told she wasn't enough, and of desperately seeking something to fill the void they had left behind. And when she finally snapped, when the weight of everything came crashing down, it was too late to fix what had been broken. The damage had already been done. End of chapter 8.